The rain had stopped, just as the hearse rolled into St. Martin's churchyard. My sister Clara stood beside me, her black gloves trembling as she held a white rose. I was grateful for the drizzle earlier. It disguised the tears we both failed to hide. Father's coffin was simple, oak, polished, without the grand trimmings Marianne had insisted she could arrange better. Best to let her do it, Clara had whispered. He'd hate the scene otherwise. But watching Marianne glide through the mourners, her black hat tilted just so, I knew she wasn't mourning. She was managing. That's what she'd always done. Managing Father, managing the estate, and finally managing us. When Father married her 6 years ago, I'd tried to give her a chance. I was 26 then, Clara 22, and Marianne already a practiced stepmother with opinions on everything from posture to inheritance. "You girls should focus on your own lives now," she'd told us at dinner once, swirling her wine. "Edward and I have everything in hand." At the funeral, that same tone hovered behind every condolence she accepted. When people came to speak to us, she somehow positioned herself between us and them, as though we were distant cousins. After the burial, the guests were invited back to the house, our house, the one in Ashcombe Lane where we'd grown up chasing the neighbour's dog across the lawn. It looked the same from the outside, ivy climbing over pale stone, but inside it had changed entirely. Father's books were gone from the library, his armchair replaced by some designer thing that looked painful to sit in. Marianne stood by the fireplace with a flute of champagne. "Edward always wanted his friends to remember him in joy, not sorrow," she said, smiling too widely. Clara and I exchanged a look. Joy? The man had passed away 3 days ago. I excused myself and went into Father's old study. The scent of pipe tobacco lingered faintly. It always would, I supposed. On the desk was a single item, his brass pocket watch, the one he'd carried since university. He'd once told me, "This watch reminds me that every minute should serve someone you love." I picked it up, turned it over. On the back, faintly scratched, were the initials EA and a small mark that hadn't been there before, almost like a line and a dot carved beside the hinge. I slipped it into my coat pocket before anyone could see. Clara found me there. "They're opening the wine, can you believe it?" she said. "It's like a party." "She's celebrating," I said quietly. Maybe because she knows what's coming. The will. That hit me harder than I expected. The will. We hadn't seen it. Father never spoke of money openly, and Marianne had always steered those conversations away. She'd once said, "Edward's estate will be handled properly. No need for sentiment." We went back to the sitting room. The air was thick with perfume and polite laughter. I spotted Mr. Gregory, Father's solicitor for nearly 20 years, seated near the piano. His briefcase sat on his lap unopened. When he saw me, he nodded subtly. A kind man with soft eyes behind his glasses. Marianne clinked her glass. "Before everyone leaves, perhaps we should address formalities," she said. "Mr. Gregory has kindly agreed to read Edward's will today." The room quieted. Clara gripped my arm. Gregory rose, cleared his throat. "Yes, Mrs. Alton, as you wish." He opened the folder and began to read the usual preamble, the date, the signatures, the witnesses. Then he reached the bequests. "To my beloved wife, Marianne Alton," he read. "I leave the residence at Ashcombe Lane, along with all possessions therein." Marianne's lips curved upward. "To my daughters Anna and Clara Alton," he continued, "I leave the remainder of my estate to be divided equally after expenses and debts." I frowned. That didn't sound small, but Marianne immediately interjected, "That would be very little, I'm afraid." The debts from Edward's business, well, they consumed most of it. I handled the figures myself. Gregory hesitated. "Indeed, the accounts show limited liquidity. The bulk of value lies in the property." So she had everything. The house, the art, the inheritance disguised as expenses. Clara spoke up. "That's not what Father wanted." "He told me last year your father was ill," Marianne cut in. He wasn't always clear. Her words were knives wrapped in silk, the guests murmured. I looked at Gregory, who adjusted his glasses nervously. That concludes the document as deposited, he said. But his eyes flicked toward me, and in that glance something unspoken passed. Later, as the guests departed and Marianne basked in condolences, Gregory approached quietly. Miss Alton, he whispered, could you and your sister visit my office tomorrow? There's one more envelope your father left in private trust. I felt my pulse quicken. Envelope? He nodded. Sealed and marked with your names. Behind me, Marianne's laughter rang out, brittle and triumphant. Tomorrow, I thought, might change everything. The next morning, Clara and I drove in silence. The rain had returned, spitting against the windscreen like gravel. Neither of us had slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marianne's smug smile at the will reading, the way she'd held her champagne flute as if she'd already won. She's probably redecorating by now, Clara muttered. Changing the curtains, throwing away his books. She's been doing that since the day he got sick, I said. We just didn't see it for what it was. When we reached Gregory and Phelps' solicitors, the brass plaque by the door looked dull in the wet light. Inside, warmth and quiet replaced the drizzle, a world of ticking clocks, framed degrees and soft carpets. Gregory greeted us personally. He seemed tired, as though he hadn't slept either. Miss Alton, Miss Clara, he said, shaking our hands. Thank you for coming. Would you like tea? We declined. He gestured toward 2 leather chairs by his desk and opened his drawer. From it, he produced a large manila envelope, sealed with a crimson wax stamp. The letters EA were pressed into the wax, Father's initials. He placed it between us. Your father delivered this to me 3 months before his passing. He requested that it be opened only if there was contention following the execution of the will. Clara let out a breathy laugh. So he knew this would happen. Gregory's expression softened. He suspected tension, yes. He was a meticulous man. He slid the envelope toward me. My hands shook slightly as I broke the seal. Inside were 2 documents and a handwritten note. I recognized Father's tidy script instantly. He'd written with a fountain pen until the end. I began to read aloud. To my daughters, Anna and Clara. If this letter is being read, it means matters have unfolded as I feared. I have always trusted Marianne to be fair, but should she fail to honour that trust, I have made provision to ensure you receive what is rightfully yours. Clara leaned closer, eyes wide. Gregory cleared his throat. The attached document is a codicil, a legally binding amendment to the will, executed and witnessed properly. It supersedes certain clauses. He unfolded the paper carefully. Under this codicil, the property at Ashcombe Lane is to remain in the family for a minimum of 10 years following my death, shared equally among my wife and daughters. Any attempt to sell or transfer ownership outside the family before that period shall invalidate the beneficiary's share. My jaw dropped. He made the house untouchable. Clara laughed through tears. She can't sell it. She can't even claim it alone. Gregory nodded. Precisely. He wanted harmony, or at least fairness. There's also mention of a trust fund he restructured last year. It's small but independent of the main estate. He handed me the second page. Figures. Account details, instructions to a private bank in Bath. Father had transferred a portion of his investments quietly, enough to give each of us a modest inheritance. I could hardly speak. All those months when Marianne had insisted Father was too frail to handle finances, he'd been preparing this. Clara turned to Gregory. Does she know about this codicil? No, he said firmly. He instructed that it remain sealed until I judged its disclosure necessary. Given her behaviour yesterday, I'd say that time has come. I could already imagine Marianne's reaction, outrage disguised as disbelief. Gregory packed the papers carefully. I'll schedule a formal meeting. Mrs. Alton must be present. It's best to handle this properly. As we stood to leave, he handed me the letter. "Keep this safe, Miss Alton. It's not legally required, but it's personal." In the car, Clara clutched the envelope like a relic. "Do you think he knew she'd try to cut us out?" "He knew her too well," I said. Then, as we turned onto the main road, Clara frowned. "You still have his watch, don't you?" I nodded. "Why?" "When you held it at the funeral, I swear she noticed. She stared at you the whole time." "Maybe she knows it means something." I hadn't told anyone about the faint mark I'd found near the hinge, the small line and dot like a tiny engraving. Could Father have hidden something more? That night I sat on my bed and turned the watch over again. The mark caught the lamplight, deliberate, precise. When I pressed gently along the hinge, a soft click sounded, and the back popped open further than usual. Inside was a thin piece of folded paper, yellowed and fragile. Clara gasped when I unfolded it. It wasn't a note. It was a map, or rather a hand-drawn floor plan of the Ashcombe Lane property. And in the corner of the library, a tiny X in Father's handwriting. "He left us something else," Clara whispered. "Or," I said slowly, "he left us proof." The next morning we were due back at the house for the codicil meeting. Marianne wouldn't be pleased. Clara and I arrived early, deliberately. The codicil meeting with Gregory and Marianne wasn't until 11, but we wanted time alone inside before she appeared. The gates creaked as we drove in, and the gravel crunched beneath the tyres, that same old sound from childhood games in the garden. Only now every crunch sounded like a warning. Marianne's car wasn't in the drive. Good. The house loomed ahead, its ivy dark and wet. When I unlocked the front door, the smell hit me. Polish, lilies, and something faintly metallic, the smell of a place recently scrubbed of its owner's presence. "Feels like she's erased him already," Clara muttered. "Not if we find what he left us," I said, holding up the pocket watch. We went straight to the library, our footsteps soft on the Persian runner. The map Father had drawn was simple, but unmistakable. A square room, the fireplace, 2 windows, and a small X between the west wall and the old bookcase. Father used to read to us here when we were children, sitting by the fire, his voice low and rhythmic. "Every house," he'd once said, "has its own heartbeat. You just have to listen for it." Now, standing in the silence, I finally understood what he meant. Clara moved aside the small table. "Here," she whispered, pointing to the baseboard behind the bookcase. I crouched, running my fingers along the wooden edge. One section felt looser than the rest. I pressed. Nothing. Then, remembering the dot and line symbol on the watch, I aligned the timepiece's hands to 1 o'clock, just as the mark seemed to suggest. There was a faint click. A small panel popped outward. "Bloody hell," Clara breathed. Inside was a narrow compartment lined with felt. Dust lay thick except for one item, a small wooden box, no larger than a loaf of bread. I pulled it out carefully and set it on the desk. It wasn't locked. Inside lay several folded letters, a stack of receipts, and a leather-bound notebook. Clara picked up the top letter. "It's from Dad," she said softly. The letter was addressed to E.A., personal copy, solicitor duplicate. The words blurred as I read aloud. If this note is found, it means my concerns were justified. I fear Marianne's intentions extend beyond affection. She has pressured me to alter my estate in ways that contradict my wishes. I have retained documentation of her withdrawals from company accounts, signed without consent. These records must be shown to my solicitor if necessary. My breath caught. He'd known. Clara's hands trembled as she unfolded the receipts, all from Father's business accounts, each bearing Marianne's neat signature. "These are dated months before he passed," she said. "And look, luxury furniture, jewellery, even transfers abroad." I flipped open the notebook. Inside were meticulous entries, dates, amounts and initials. Each page was proof. Clara's voice broke. She stole from him while he was alive, and then tried to make it look like he'd died with debts, I said. The truth lay heavy between us, the weight of betrayal and vindication mixed together. Footsteps sounded from the corridor. We froze. The front door opened. Voices, Marianne's crisp tone, followed by Gregory's polite murmur. She was early. Quick, I whispered. We slid the box back into the compartment, leaving only the notebook tucked beneath my coat. The panel clicked shut just as the door swung open. "There you are," Marianne said, stepping inside. She wore a black cashmere coat and that same smile she'd worn at the funeral. "I see you still feel entitled to wander my home." "It's not yours," Clara said before I could stop her. "Not entirely." Marianne's smile sharpened. "We'll see what the law says." Gregory appeared behind her, holding his briefcase. "Ladies," he said cautiously, "shall we proceed to the sitting room?" We followed them, tension coiled tight as piano wire. The reading was brief but volcanic. Gregory explained the codicil clearly, word by word. As he read the clause about joint ownership, Marianne's expression hardened. "This is absurd," she snapped. "Edward must have been coerced. He would never— He executed it personally in my office," Gregory interrupted. "In sound mind, with witnesses." She turned to us, eyes cold. "You've manipulated him. Both of you. He pitied you girls, and you used that pity to twist his judgment." Clara rose from her chair. "You stole from him." Marianne's face went white. "What did you say?" I stepped forward, my voice steady. "You heard her. You'll deny it now, but soon enough we'll prove it." Gregory's brows knitted. "Perhaps we should all take a breath." But Marianne wasn't listening. "Get out," she hissed. "Get out of this house." Her composure cracked, if only for a second. I saw panic flicker behind the anger. She knew. We left before the argument could boil over. In the car, Clara exhaled shakily. "She's terrified." "She should be," I said, taking out the notebook. "Because this is what will bring her down." I flipped to the back of the book and noticed one last line Father had written before the pages ended. "If justice falters, truth will still find its witness. Keep faith in time." I ran my thumb over the brass watch in my pocket. For the first time since the funeral, it ticked. Steady. Alive. A week passed after discovering Father's hidden compartment. Clara and I had spent hours cataloguing the notebook and letters. Each page was more damning than the last. Unauthorized transfers, lavish purchases in her name, and subtle manipulations to make the estate appear smaller than it was. Gregory had advised patience. "Let her make the first move," he said. "There's power in observation." Then came the invitation. A glossy card, hand-delivered by a courier, embossed with Marianne's monogram. "Dinner, 7 p.m., Ashcombe Lane." Clara held it in her hand, brows furrowed. "She's baiting us." "Exactly," I said. "And we're going. She wants to feel in control." That evening, the house looked exactly as it had at the funeral, only more polished. Marianne greeted us in the hall, wearing an emerald silk dress and the same smirk that had haunted us for weeks. "I'm delighted you could come," she said, voice syrupy. "Let's put the past behind us and enjoy a civilized evening." I kept the notebook hidden in my bag. Clara held the envelope with the codicil inside. We stepped into the drawing room, noting the subtle shift in Marianne's posture. Her confidence was polished, but there was a flicker of something wary behind her eyes. Dinner was served in the grand dining room. Crystal glasses reflected the candlelight, and the roast smelled rich and indulgent. Marianne began with small talk, the kind that was designed to unsettle rather than entertain. "Did you both enjoy the church service?" she asked. Her tone was honeyed, but it cut through the warmth of the room like a knife. Clara replied evenly, "Yes, it was. Proper." Marianne's smile tightened. "And I trust you've been consulting your solicitor. Gregory is a competent man, I hear." I swallowed. Indeed, very competent. She sipped her wine, her eyes flicking to the side where the firelight caught the brass of the pocket watch I had slipped into my coat pocket. A small twitch at the corner of her mouth betrayed her recognition. "I saw that watch at the funeral," she said casually. "Father cherished it, did he not? Strange how some objects carry more memory than others." Clara and I exchanged a glance. She knew. She knew we'd found something. Conversation turned to the estate. Marianne tried to dominate it, casually implying that the codicil was a mere technicality. "Edward wanted harmony," she said, "but he trusted me with execution. One cannot simply overrule a widow's decisions after the fact." Gregory, present but silent, shifted in his chair. "Legally, Mrs. Alton, the codicil has full effect. It supersedes previous clauses regarding property disposition." Marianne's eyes narrowed. "I see." Her voice was calm, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped the stem of her glass. As dessert was served, she leaned forward slightly, her tone softening. "You girls must understand. Edward was a sentimental man. He would never have wanted a family torn apart over money." I placed my hands flat on the table. "We're not trying to tear the family apart. We're honouring him. All he wanted was fairness." The remainder of the evening was a subtle war of glances and veiled comments. Marianne attempted to provoke us with every flourish. A story about a charitable donation she'd claimed he had. Approved. An offhand remark about our lack of practical experience. Each strike was precise, like a fencer testing their opponent. By the time coffee arrived, Marianne leaned back in her chair, her mask of composure back in place. "I do hope we can move forward," she said. "Perhaps you'll see the benefit of guidance from someone with experience in managing estates." Clara whispered under her breath. "She thinks she's won tonight." I nodded. Let her think that. Tomorrow the solicitor will deliver evidence she cannot ignore. As we left, the air outside had grown sharper. We walked down the gravel path, the sound of our boots steady and purposeful. For the first time, I felt a surge of determination. Not anger, not revenge, but clarity. Marianne could orchestrate dinners, manipulate conversations, and parade elegance. But she could not rewrite the meticulous record Father had left. And if she tried to move assets or challenge the codicil, Gregory would be ready. The night felt colder as we reached the car, yet the brass watch in my pocket ticked steadily, a heartbeat against the tension. It reminded me of Father's words. Every minute should serve someone you love. Tonight, every minute had served justice in the making. 2 days after the dinner, Marianne's first move became apparent. A letter arrived at our solicitor's office, copied to both Clara and me. She had filed for an injunction to prevent any changes to the property or access to the estate accounts until a formal hearing could review the codicil. The language was precise, sharp and intimidating, designed to make us doubt ourselves. Clara slumped into the sofa at Gregory's office. "She's trying to scare us out of our inheritance," she muttered. "She's buying time," I said, scanning the letter. "And she's hoping we'll panic." Gregory frowned, glasses slipping down his nose. "It's a standard tactic in contested estates. She's aggressive, but not yet above board." We spent the next hours preparing our response. Evidence from Father's hidden compartment became central. The codicil, the notebook, the letters, every entry a testament to Marianne's financial manipulations. Yet the looming court date left me uneasy. We weren't just fighting for money. We were fighting for Father's legacy. The day of the hearing arrived. The courthouse smelled faintly of polished wood and legal precedent. Marianne appeared first, flawless, flanked by her own counsel. I could hear the quiet confidence in her steps, the way she measured every eye in the room, claiming authority simply by presence. Gregory introduced Clara and me as interested parties, emphasizing our legal standing as daughters and beneficiaries under both the original will and the codicil. Marianne's lawyer wasted no time, attempting to cast doubt on the codicil's validity, claiming procedural errors and alleged undue influence. The judge listened patiently as both sides presented arguments. Marianne's words were elegant and cutting. She implied that we, young and inexperienced, had somehow manipulated our father. My stomach turned at each insinuation. Even the court's decorum felt like an enemy, emphasizing her every polished phrase. When our turn came, Gregory presented the notebook, the letters, and the receipts. We had the codicil, witnessed and executed properly, but Marianne's lawyer introduced a new document, a notarized letter suggesting minor revisions father had considered, but never finalized, hinting that he had second thoughts. The room fell silent. Even Gregory's steady expression faltered for a brief moment. Marianne's smile widened. "You see, Your Honour," her lawyer said, "there is ambiguity. The daughter's claim relies heavily on assumption, not confirmed directives. The estate's primary executor, myself, has acted in good faith to honour what Mr. Alton intended." The judge leaned back, his expression unreadable. We could almost hear the tick of the courtroom clock counting against us. After a tense pause, he ruled, "Temporary injunction granted." The property would remain under Marianne's control until a further hearing, and no assets could be moved or accessed by us in the meantime. I felt the weight of the setback crush the air from my lungs. Clara's hand found mine, trembling. "It's only temporary," I whispered. Gregory nodded soberly. "Yes, but it's a blow. She's public now. The neighbourhood and anyone paying attention sees her as dominant. Your father's codicil is powerful, but in practice she can stall, and she will." Outside the courthouse, the rain had returned in fine sheets. I clenched the brass watch in my pocket, feeling its heartbeat against my fingers. Every second counted, but the next moves had to be precise. Clara said, her voice quiet but determined, "We have the notebook, the letters, everything. She can delay, but she can't hide forever." "I know," I said, staring at the wet pavement. "We're still ahead. We just have to wait for the right moment." That night, back at the flat, we went over the notebook again. One page stood out, a faint scribble about a financial trustee father had engaged quietly, outside Gregory's knowledge. A backup plan. He knew she might try this, Clara said. This trustee could bypass her control. "Yes," I said. "We just need to locate him." That's the pivot. The setback was public and humiliating, yes, but for the first time the path forward was clear. Marianne's confidence had a flaw, and we had a lifeline her arrogance hadn't accounted for. The following morning, Clara and I met with Gregory again. He had managed to locate Edward Alton's private financial trustee, a retired accountant named Mr. Harold Finch, living quietly in Farnham. He had overseen a portion of father's investments separate from the main estate, precisely the safeguard Edward had hinted at in his notebook. "Miss Alton." "Miss Clara," Gregory began. "Mr. Finch confirmed that father entrusted him with funds and documents intended solely for your benefit, independent of any property dispute. Access is restricted but legally binding." Clara exhaled, relief flickering in her eyes. "So Marianne can't touch it?" "Not legally," Gregory said firmly. "She can stall, delay, intimidate, but she cannot seize these assets." We arranged to visit Mr. Finch the next day. His house smelled of old ledgers and coffee. He greeted us warmly, grey-haired and precise, eyes sharp behind wire-framed glasses. "Your father prepared thoroughly," he said, handing us 2 small, sealed envelopes. "These are yours. Bank access, investment instructions, and copies of documents that substantiate the codicil's enforceability. Keep them safe. I turned the envelope in my hands, feeling the weight of Father's meticulous planning. Every ounce of his concern, love and foresight had been preserved. Clara whispered, "He always thought ahead, didn't he?" "Yes," I said, "and he made sure we had the means to reclaim what's ours, the way he wanted." Back at Gregory's office, we reviewed the documents. The funds were modest, but sufficient to make Marianne's obstruction futile. Even better, Finch had copies of all correspondence Marianne had made regarding unauthorized withdrawals, now formally documented. "This," Gregory said, tapping the ledger, "will be the key. Marianne's own signatures, her attempts to transfer funds without proper authority, all legal proof against her." With our newfound leverage, we began crafting a strategy. The plan was twofold. First, a formal notice to Marianne highlighting the trustee-controlled assets, signalling our readiness to pursue legal remedies if she overstepped. Second, a structured timeline for challenging the injunction in court, emphasizing the codicil's enforceability and Edward's intentions. Clara smiled faintly. "I never thought I'd be happy to send her letters." I grinned. "This is not just letters. This is justice." Over the next few days, we sent the formal notices. Marianne received them, and the response was immediate. The tone of her letters shifted from polished superiority to sharp defensiveness. Every word hinted at frustration, a recognition that she had miscalculated. On the third day, we returned to Ashcombe Lane under the pretext of a casual visit, Gregory accompanying us to ensure proper procedure. Marianne opened the door, wearing a mask of cordiality, but her hands betrayed tension as she clutched the doorknob. "I see you've been busy," she said, voice tight. "Just ensuring Father's wishes are respected," I replied, holding the notebook subtly at my side. "We understand you've been given certain rights, but please remember, some provisions cannot be ignored." Her eyes darted to the watch I wore around my wrist, then to the notebook peeking out of my bag. Recognition flared. Panic threatened to crack her mask. Gregory interjected, "We trust that full compliance will avoid unnecessary legal escalation." Clara added, calm but firm, "Everything is documented, Marianne. Every transaction, every signature, every attempt to claim the estate alone. It's all here." Her lips parted as if to argue, but no words came. We could see the wheels turning. Her public confidence had been undercut by our preparation. Later, back in the car, Clara exhaled. "It feels possible now, like the tide has turned." I nodded, feeling the brass watch against my chest. Its ticking echoed Father's wisdom, patience, strategy, and clarity. Marianne's arrogance had blinded her, but Edward's foresight ensured we weren't powerless. The pivot was complete. We had leverage. We had proof. And for the first time, the outcome seemed inevitable. The day of the final hearing arrived with an unseasonably clear sky. Clara and I drove in silence, each lost in thought. The brass watch ticked softly in my coat pocket, a steady reminder that every move counted. Gregory had prepared us meticulously, every document, ledger, and letter ready to be presented. Even the trustee, Mr. Finch, had agreed to testify if necessary. As we entered the courthouse, Marianne was already there, seated with her lawyer. She wore a calm expression, but it was brittle, the kind that cracks under sustained pressure. I noticed her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Clara whispered, "She looks worried. Gregory called the hearing to order." The judge presided with a patient, measured tone, inviting both sides to present evidence. Marianne's counsel began, attempting the usual narrative. Claims of ambiguity in the codicil, alleged undue influence, and insinuations that we had manipulated Father. Her words were polished but hollow, lacking substance. Then Gregory presented our evidence. The codicil itself, signed and witnessed, was followed by the letters from father detailing Marianne's manipulations. Next came the receipts and ledger entries proving unauthorized financial actions. Finally, the trustee's affidavit confirmed the independent accounts and investments, completely beyond her reach. Marianne's smile faltered as Gregory methodically laid each piece of evidence before the judge. "Your Honour," Gregory said, "these documents demonstrate not only the validity of the codicil, but also attempts to circumvent it. Mrs. Alton acted without consent in financial matters that were legally under her husband's control." Marianne shifted in her seat. She opened her mouth to speak, but Gregory handed over the notebook, the ledger, and copies of every letter. Her lawyer faltered, flipping through pages that left no ambiguity. The judge reviewed the materials carefully. Silence hung in the room, tense and electric. Finally, he spoke. "The court finds the codicil legally binding. Mrs. Marianne Alton's attempts to obstruct access to the estate and its assets are invalid. Further, evidence of unauthorized financial manipulation shall be noted in the court record. The property at Ashcombe Lane is to remain jointly held by the beneficiaries as stipulated. Trustee-controlled assets are to be released to Miss Anna Alton and Miss Clara Alton forthwith. No party may act outside these parameters without further court approval." A collective exhale swept through the gallery. Clara and I exchanged glances. Disbelief, relief, and triumph mingled together. Marianne's face drained of colour. She looked around the courtroom, every carefully crafted facade of control stripped bare. "This cannot be," she muttered under her breath, more to herself than anyone else. Gregory quietly reminded us that the court record would make Marianne's financial mismanagement a permanent matter of public record. The social consequences were just as real as the legal ones. No one would overlook her arrogance, deceit, and the way she attempted to cut 2 daughters out of their father's legacy. As we left the courtroom, reporters lingered outside, but we didn't need to explain ourselves. The brass watch ticked in my coat pocket, and I realized the rhythm of justice had finally caught up with her. Clara squeezed my hand. "We did it," she said softly. "Yes," I agreed. But it wasn't just about winning. It was about honouring him, and proving that truth matters more than cunning. Outside, the sun broke through clouds, catching the edges of Ashcombe Lane in golden light. The estate, once the stage of tension and deceit, was now a symbol of justice restored. The first morning after the court's decision, Clara and I arrived at Ashcombe Lane together. The autumn sunlight glinted on the damp ivy and the stone facade, casting long shadows across the gravel drive. The house no longer felt like Marianne's carefully curated stage. It was ours again, anchored in memory and justice. Marianne was nowhere in sight. Rumour had it she had moved to London temporarily, avoiding the neighbours' whispers. The court record had not only secured our inheritance, but had documented her attempts to manipulate and withhold assets. Socially and legally, her position was irreversibly weakened. We unlocked the front door together, the familiar click echoing in the hall. The library, Father's favourite room, and was waiting, untouched since the funeral, a little dust settling like a reminder of the weeks we had endured. I placed the brass watch back on its shelf, its gentle ticking now comforting rather than secretive. It had guided us through every step, from discovery to court victory. Clara sat in Father's old armchair, running her fingers along the armrest. "Feels like he's here," she murmured. "He is," I said softly. "In every letter, every plan he left us. He knew what we'd face, and he gave us the tools to overcome it." Over the next few weeks we settled the details. Gregory coordinated transfers from the trustee-controlled accounts. Marianne's access to the estate was restricted to what the court had sanctioned, a bitter victory she could not spin into social triumph. Her attempts to sell or alter the property were now moot. Ashcombe Lane would remain a shared inheritance for 10 years, exactly as Father intended. We began restoring the house, not extravagantly, but with care. Each painting returned to its proper wall, Father's books dusted and replaced on the shelves. The home became a sanctuary once again, a place where two sisters could breathe, remember, and honour the man who had loved them fiercely. One evening, as we sat by the fire with mugs of tea, Clara smiled at me. "Do you think she'll ever admit it?" "How wrong she was." I shook my head. "No, but that doesn't matter. Justice doesn't need confession to work. It only needs truth and persistence." The brass watch ticked steadily between us, its rhythm echoing Father's wisdom, patience, foresight, and love for those who deserved it. Marianne's pride and manipulations had been exposed, her social standing dented, and the law had sided with honesty and diligence. For the first time in months, we laughed together, remembering the childhood games, the evenings Father had read to us, the little jokes he had always loved. Our inheritance was more than property or money. It was the restoration of our family's integrity, a reminder that those who act with fairness and courage ultimately prevail. And though Marianne would continue her life, the consequences of her greed were clear and permanent: legal accountability, public record, and the social knowledge of her duplicity. Clara held my hand. "He would be proud." "Yes," I said, glancing at the watch. "And so are we." Author's note: this story reflects the principle that justice can be achieved without violence, through patience, careful planning, and ethical persistence. The sisters' victory was both legal and moral, showing that foresight and truth can counter greed and manipulation. Marianne's actions carried consequences proportionate to her wrongdoing: legal restriction of assets, public exposure, and social accountability. The recurring motif of Father's brass watch symbolised guidance, patience, and moral clarity throughout their struggle. Ultimately, fairness and perseverance restored both inheritance and family integrity.